My wife Kendra vanished for 4 entire days, leaving me frantically calling hospitals and filing missing person reports. I was convinced something terrible had happened to her, but when I finally tracked her down at her friend's house, she wasn't kidnapped or hurt. She was perfectly fine and absolutely furious with me. Turns out her disappearance was completely planned. She wanted to teach me a lesson about appreciation by putting me through the worst 4 days of my life. What I didn't know yet was that her friends had been secretly filming my breakdown the whole time, but nothing prepared me for her punchline. Let me tell you how this nightmare started. The morning that started my nightmare. Tuesday morning started like any other day in our 6-year marriage. I'd wake up at 6:30, grab coffee, kiss Kendra goodbye while she was still in bed, and head to the office. She'd usually text me around 10 a.m. about her plans for the day. Except this Tuesday, my phone stayed silent. No good morning text, no random thoughts about dinner plans, no complaints about the neighbor's dog barking too early. I figured she was sleeping in or maybe had plans she forgot to mention. Kendra sometimes visited her mom on weekdays or met up with her friend group for coffee. She didn't need to report her every move to me, and I wasn't the type of husband who needed constant updates. We trusted each other, and adults don't need permission slips to leave the house. When I got home that evening around 6 p.m., the house felt different. Not dramatically different, just quiet in a way that made me pause at the front door. Kendra's car wasn't in the driveway, which wasn't unusual, but something felt off. I called out her name as I walked in, expecting to hear her voice from the kitchen or living room. Nothing. I checked the obvious places first. Maybe she was napping or taking a shower. The bedroom was empty, bathroom too. Her side of the bed was made, which was normal, but her phone charger was gone from the nightstand. That's when I noticed the suitcase missing from our closet. The medium-sized one we used for weekend trips. My brain immediately started cycling through reasonable explanations. Her sister lived 3 hours away and sometimes needed help with her kids. Maybe there was a family emergency she forgot to tell me about. Or maybe she decided to surprise her mom with a spontaneous visit. Kendra could be impulsive like that, especially when she felt cooped up at home for too long. I sent her a text asking if everything was okay and where she was. Then I called. Straight to voicemail. I left a message trying to sound casual, like I wasn't slowly transforming into a worried husband stereotype. Maybe her phone died, or she left it on silent. People survived for decades without being constantly reachable. She'd probably call me back within an hour with some perfectly logical explanation that would make me feel silly for worrying. But 8 p.m. came and went with no response. Then 9 p.m. By 10 p.m., I was refreshing my phone every few minutes, checking to see if I'd somehow missed her text or call. I had Google searched kidnapping hotlines, convinced I'd missed the memo on home and visibility hacks. My brain was crafting increasingly dramatic scenarios. Maybe she decided to book a spa weekend and forgot to mention it. Some spas had strict no-phone policies, right? Wednesday morning arrived, but still no word from Kendra. I called in sick to work, which I never do, because I couldn't concentrate on spreadsheets when my wife had apparently evaporated into thin air. I tried calling her again. Voicemail. I texted her mom, trying to sound casual while fishing for information. Her mom hadn't heard from her either and seemed confused about why I was asking. I played it off like I was just checking if they had plans I forgot about. By Wednesday afternoon, my reasonable explanations were getting more creative. Maybe she ran into an old friend and they decided to have an impromptu girls' weekend. Maybe she was planning a surprise for our anniversary, which wasn't for another 4 months, but perhaps she was really organized this year. I was grasping at increasingly ridiculous straws while trying to convince myself this was normal behavior. Wednesday evening brought a new level of concern. I started calling her friends, which felt weird, because I barely knew most of them. I had to explain who I was and why I was looking for my own wife, which made me sound like either a controlling husband or a complete idiot. None of them had heard from Kendra recently. They all seemed genuinely surprised that I didn't know where she was, which made me feel even more stupid for not keeping better track of her daily activities. Thursday morning, I woke up to the same empty house and the same silent phone. This wasn't a spa day or a surprise anniversary planning session. This was becoming something else entirely. I called her sister directly, abandoning any pretense of casual inquiry. Her sister hadn't heard from Kendra either, and started asking me questions I couldn't answer. Had we been fighting? Was she upset about something? Did she seem different lately? I found myself defending our marriage to her sister while simultaneously wondering if I'd missed some obvious signs that Kendra was unhappy. The house felt like a crime scene where nothing had actually been stolen. I walked through every room looking for clues about where she might have gone. Her toiletries were mostly still there, but her favorite shampoo was missing. Her jewelry box looked normal, but I couldn't remember which earrings she usually wore. I was trying to be a detective in my own home, analyzing evidence about a person I'd been married to for 6 years. By Thursday afternoon, I was Googling things like how long before someone is considered missing and what to do when your spouse disappears. The internet was full of horror stories and legal advice that made everything seem more serious. I started making lists of hospitals to call, wondering if she'd been in an accident and somehow lost her ID. Maybe she was unconscious somewhere, unable to tell doctors who she was or who to contact. Thursday evening, I realized I was no longer making excuses for normal behavior. I was trying to solve a mystery that had no logical explanation. Adults don't just vanish for 3 days without telling anyone where they're going. Something was wrong, and I needed to figure out exactly what that something was. When worry becomes full-scale detective mode, I transformed from concerned husband into full-blown amateur detective operating out of my own living room. I sat at our kitchen table with a notepad, writing down names of every person Kendra had ever mentioned in casual conversation. I was about to start cold calling people based on the contact list in her phone, which I'd never looked at before and felt creepy accessing now. I cold called half her contacts, from book club to dental hygienist, each one more bewildered than the last. Every call went straight to voicemail or ended with awkward explanations about who I was and why I was looking for my own wife. Jessica from our old book club seemed genuinely confused about why I didn't know where Kendra was, which made me feel pathetic. She hadn't heard from Kendra in over a week and asked if we'd been fighting. I found myself defending our marriage to someone who barely knew us, while simultaneously wondering if I'd missed some obvious marital red flags. The conversations followed the same humiliating pattern. I'd have to explain our entire relationship dynamic to justify why I was calling about Kendra's whereabouts. Her former coworkers barely remembered her, which made sense since she'd left years ago, but I was grasping at every possible connection. One woman remembered Kendra mentioning she wanted to travel more, which sent me spiraling into theories about spontaneous road trips or secret vacation plans. The calls to her gym friends were particularly humiliating because I had to describe Kendra to people who saw her more regularly than I did. They knew her workout schedule better than I knew her daily routine, which made me realize how little attention I'd been paying to her actual life. One woman mentioned that Kendra sometimes talked about feeling stuck in a rut, which triggered a whole new wave of paranoid theories about midlife crises and secret dissatisfaction with our marriage. By Friday morning, I was calling hospitals with the systematic approach of someone who'd watched too many crime documentaries. I had a script prepared about my missing wife and practiced ways to describe her without sounding like a complete lunatic. The hospital staff were polite but unhelpful, explaining that they couldn't give out patient information without proper identification. I found myself arguing with nurses about privacy laws while my wife was potentially lying unconscious somewhere with amnesia. I started driving around town looking for her car, which turned me into a neighborhood creep who slowly cruised past strip malls and coffee shops. I checked every grocery store parking lot, every Target, every place she might reasonably go on a normal day. I was operating on the theory that maybe she'd had some kind of breakdown and was living in her car, too embarrassed to come home. The search through our house became increasingly frantic and invasive. I went through her drawers looking for clues, reading old journals, and checking her browser history like a private investigator. I found notes about redecorating the living room and Amazon searches for throw pillows, which seemed like evidence of someone planning to stay in the marriage, not flee from it. Every normal piece of evidence contradicted my growing fears that she'd been secretly planning to leave me. I called her old college roommate in Chicago, who I'd never spoken to before but whose number I found in Kendra's address book. That conversation was surreal because I had to explain 6 years of marriage to someone who knew Kendra from before we met. Her roommate kept asking if Kendra had mentioned feeling isolated or wanting to reconnect with old friends, which made me paranoid that Kendra had been reaching out to her support network without telling me. Friday evening, I started calling emergency rooms in neighboring towns, expanding my search radius like I was looking for a lost pet. I gave the same description of Kendra over and over until it started sounding mechanical and weird. The staff at each hospital were professionally sympathetic but clearly dealing with someone who was losing his grip on reality. I started carrying a recent photo of Kendra in case someone needed visual confirmation, which made me feel like I was starring in a missing person documentary. The breakthrough came when I called her friend Monica, who I'd only met once at a wedding. Monica's voice wobbled when I mentioned Kendra's name, and she paused just long enough to make me suspicious. She claimed she hadn't heard from Kendra recently, but something about her tone made me think she was lying. I pressed her for details, asking if Kendra had mentioned any plans or seemed upset about anything. Monica kept insisting she didn't know anything, but she sounded nervous and eager to get off the phone. That phone call triggered a whole new level of paranoia. If Monica was lying, maybe other people were too. Maybe Kendra had specifically asked her friends not to tell me where she was, which meant this wasn't an accident or emergency. Maybe she was avoiding me intentionally, which opened up terrifying possibilities about the state of our marriage that I'd been completely oblivious to. I started reviewing every conversation we'd had over the past month, looking for signs that Kendra was unhappy or planning to leave. I remembered her mentioning that she felt bored sometimes, but I'd assumed that was normal for someone who didn't work outside the home. She'd occasionally make comments about wanting more excitement in her life, but I thought she meant hobbies or social activities, not escape from our marriage. By Saturday morning, I was operating on 3 hours of sleep and convinced that everyone in Kendra's social circle was part of some conspiracy to keep me in the dark. I'd created elaborate theories about secret meetings and hidden communications. The realization that this wasn't just unusual behavior, but something completely unprecedented in our relationship hit me like a physical blow. Kendra had never disappeared before, never gone more than a day without contact, never made me worry like this. Whatever was happening, it was intentional, planned, and designed to make me suffer. I needed help beyond my amateur detective skills. It was time to make this official, the police report that made everything real. Walking into the police station felt like crossing into a different reality where my personal crisis became official paperwork. The desk sergeant handed me a clipboard with forms asking for details I'd never thought to memorize about my own wife. Kendra's exact height and weight, identifying marks, her social security number. I found myself guessing at basic information about the person I'd been married to for 6 years. Officer Martinez called my name after 20 minutes of form filling that made my situation feel simultaneously more official and more ridiculous. He listened politely as I explained the whole situation, taking notes and asking clarifying questions that made me realize how little concrete evidence I had that something was actually wrong. The conversation took a turn when Officer Martinez explained that adults have the legal right to disappear whenever they want. Unless there's evidence of foul play, adults have the right to vanish, he said in the same tone you'd use to explain that stores close on Sundays. Apparently, taking your belongings and car and leaving without telling anyone isn't actually a crime when you're a grown adult. I tried to explain that this behavior was completely unlike Kendra, that she'd never gone a day without contact before. Officer Martinez nodded sympathetically, but kept returning to the same points. She'd taken her belongings voluntarily. She'd driven away in her own car. There were no signs of struggle at our house. From a legal standpoint, Kendra had exercised her right to go wherever she wanted without reporting her location to anyone, including her husband. The frustration was building in my chest like pressure in a kettle. I found myself arguing with a police officer about my own wife's behavior, trying to convince him that her disappearance was suspicious when all the evidence suggested she'd left on purpose. He asked whether we'd been fighting recently, if she seemed unhappy, if there were any marital problems. I insisted it wasn't her style. He gently demolished my case with actual law. Officer Martinez explained. There's standard procedure for missing person cases involving adults who appear to have left voluntarily. They'd enter Kendra's information into their system, check with local hospitals and morgues, and keep the case open for investigation Unless new evidence emerged suggesting she was in danger or had been the victim of a crime, there wasn't much else they could do immediately. The paperwork felt both validating and humiliating. I was officially reporting that something was wrong, which meant my concerns were being taken seriously enough to generate a case number and file. But I was also admitting to strangers that I had no idea where my wife was or why she'd left, which made me feel like I'd failed at the most basic requirement of being a husband. Officer Martinez asked for recent photos of Kendra, which I realized I didn't have on my phone. Most of our pictures were on her phone or stored on her laptop, which meant I had to describe my wife's appearance from memory while a police officer wrote down details for an official report. I found myself struggling to remember exactly what she'd been wearing the last time I saw her, which was apparently Tuesday morning when I'd kissed her goodbye without paying attention to her outfit. The questions about our relationship dynamics were particularly awkward. Had Kendra mentioned feeling trapped or wanting more independence? Did she have access to her own money and bank accounts? Were there any controlling behaviors in our marriage that might explain why she'd leave without warning? I kept insisting that our relationship was normal and healthy, but having to defend my marriage to a police officer made me question whether I'd been missing obvious signs of problems. Officer Martinez gave me his card and explained that I should call immediately if Kendra contacted me, or if I discovered any new information about her whereabouts. He mentioned that filing a false report was a crime, which I assumed was his standard warning to make sure I wasn't wasting police resources on some elaborate marital drama. The implication was clear. If Kendra showed up tomorrow, having spent the week at a spa, I'd look like either a paranoid husband or someone who didn't understand his own marriage. I wrote down the case number on the back of his card, figuring I'd need to reference it later. The number made everything feel real, in a way that scared me more than the uncertainty of the past 3 days. Walking out of the police station, I felt simultaneously validated and terrified. I'd officially reported my wife missing, which meant my concerns were serious enough to warrant police attention. But I'd also involved law enforcement in what might turn out to be a simple misunderstanding, which would be embarrassing beyond belief. The drive home was surreal. Kendra's disappearance was now part of an official police investigation, which meant this situation had crossed a line from personal crisis to legal matter. Whatever was happening, it was about to get a lot more complicated. But sitting in my driveway, staring at the case number on Officer Martinez's card, I realized the police weren't going to solve this mystery anytime soon. They'd made it clear that unless Kendra turned up dead or kidnapped, this was basically a waiting game. I couldn't just sit around hoping she'd call or come home on her own schedule. If I wanted answers, I was going to have to find them myself. The Great Neighborhood Search Mission. Saturday afternoon, I decided to take control of this situation myself. I had a plan that seemed completely logical at the time. Systematically drive through every neighborhood in our area until I found Kendra's car. I drove every lot within a 5-mile radius, 2 hours, 50 square miles, 0 sightings. My first stop was the shopping center 3 blocks away, where I drove up and down every row of the parking lot like I was conducting a military operation. A security guard watched me through the window of the mall entrance, probably wondering why this guy was driving in circles around the parking lot at 5 miles per hour. I waved at him like everything was normal, which probably made me look even more suspicious. The grocery store parking lot was next, and that's where I encountered my first concerned neighbor. Mrs. Henderson from 2 streets over knocked on my car window while I was scanning the rows of vehicles. She asked if I was looking for a parking spot, and I had to explain that I was actually looking for my wife's car because she'd been missing for 4 days. Mrs. Henderson's expression shifted from helpful to deeply concerned, and she started asking questions about whether I'd called the police and if Kendra was okay. I found myself giving her the entire story right there in the middle of the parking lot, which made me realize how crazy I probably sounded. The real comedy started when I began checking residential neighborhoods, driving slowly down streets I'd never been on before. I realized I looked like either a lost delivery driver or someone casing houses for a robbery. A woman walking her dog stopped and stared at me as I crept past her house for the 3rd time, trying to get a better look at the car in her driveway. I rolled down my window and called out that I was looking for my wife's car, which probably made me sound like either a stalker or someone having a mental breakdown. My rational search plan started falling apart when I found myself checking the same locations multiple times. I kept thinking maybe I'd missed something the first time, or maybe Kendra's car had appeared since my last visit. I was operating on the logic that if I just looked hard enough, I'd eventually find what I was looking for, even though I had no evidence that Kendra was anywhere in the area. The paranoia kicked in around hour 3 of my search mission. I started noticing people watching me from their windows and wondering if they knew something I didn't. When I saw 2 women talking in a driveway and glancing at my car, I became convinced they were discussing Kendra's disappearance. I actually considered pulling over and asking them if they'd seen her, but I realized that would probably result in someone calling the police about a suspicious man harassing neighborhood residents. The awkward encounters with strangers multiplied as my search continued. A man at a gas station asked if I needed directions because I'd been sitting in my car staring at the parking lot for 10 minutes. I explained that I was looking for my wife's car, and he offered to help me search, which was kind of him, but also made me feel pathetic. 2 people were now walking around a gas station looking for a car that probably wasn't there, and I was the reason the stranger was wasting his Saturday afternoon. I started developing increasingly elaborate theories about where Kendra might be hiding. Maybe she was staying at a hotel under a fake name. Maybe she was parked behind a building where I couldn't see her car from the street. Maybe she was moving from location to location to avoid being found. I was creating spy movie scenarios in my head while driving around suburban neighborhoods like a lost pizza delivery driver. The strangest part was how normal everyone else's Saturday looked. Families were having barbecues, kids were playing in yards, people were washing their cars and mowing their lawns. I was having the worst week of my life, but the rest of the world was just continuing with their regular weekend activities. I felt like I was watching normal life through the windshield of my car, while existing in some parallel universe where wives just disappeared without explanation. After 4 hours of systematic searching that had turned into aimless wandering, I was ready to admit defeat. I attracted suspicious looks from dozens of strangers and was starting to accept that my wife wasn't just hiding somewhere in our general area, waiting to be discovered by her increasingly frantic husband driving around in circles. Just when I was about to collapse in despair, I turned down Maple Street, a quiet residential area about 15 minutes from our house. I was barely paying attention anymore, just driving because I didn't want to go home to an empty house. And there it was, sitting in the driveway of a house I'd never seen before. Kendra's silver Honda Civic parked like it belonged there, like this was the most natural thing in the world. I pulled over and sat there staring at her car for probably 2 full minutes trying to process what I was seeing. Relief, mixed with confusion, mixed with a new kind of anxiety about what I was going to find when I knocked on that door. After 4 days of searching, the awkward doorstep confrontation, but now I had no idea. Standing on that doorstep, staring at Kendra's car, felt like the end of a 4-day nightmare and the beginning of something potentially worse. The relief was overwhelming at first. She was alive, she was safe, she hadn't been kidnapped or murdered or lying in a hospital somewhere with amnesia. But as I walked up to the front door, that relief started mixing with confusion and a growing sense that something was seriously wrong with this whole situation. I knocked on the door with the kind of urgent politeness you use when you're trying not to completely lose your mind in public. Claudia opened it, and her face immediately told me everything I needed to know about how awkward this was about to get. She looked like someone who'd been caught stealing office supplies, all wide-eyed and fidgety. Her smile was the kind of forced expression people wear when they're trying to pretend everything is normal while their world is collapsing around them. "Hi, Tom," she said, and even those 2 words sounded strained. She was blocking the doorway with her body, which seemed like a weird way to greet someone whose wife had been missing for 4 days. I asked if Kendra was there, and Claudia did this thing where she opened her mouth, but no words came out. The pause stretched long enough to become uncomfortable for both of us. I could practically see the gears turning in her head as she tried to figure out what to say. She kept glancing back into the house like she was getting instructions from someone, which made me wonder who else was involved in whatever was happening here. Finally, she managed to say that Kendra was there, but she said it like she was confessing to a crime. That's when Kendra appeared behind Claudia, and the emotional whiplash nearly knocked me over. The relief of seeing her alive and unharmed was immediately replaced by total confusion about why she looked annoyed to see me. She wasn't running toward me with tears of joy. She wasn't explaining where she'd been or apologizing for making me worry. She was standing there with her arms crossed, looking at me like I was the one who'd done something wrong. I nearly hugged her until I saw the glare. My hero had become my torment her. I asked what the hell was going on, why she hadn't called, if she was okay. All the questions that had been building up for 4 days came pouring out at once. Kendra's response was to look even more irritated, which made absolutely no sense given the circumstances. I was the one who'd been filing missing person reports and calling hospitals. I was the one who'd spent 4 days convinced something terrible had happened to her. But somehow, I was getting the look that wives usually reserve for husbands who forget to take out the trash. Claudia was practically vibrating with discomfort during this whole exchange. She kept avoiding eye contact with me, which suggested she knew more about the situation than she was letting on. Her role in this situation was becoming clearer by the minute, and it wasn't making her happy.